They were the pride of every farm, gleaming machines that ripped through a field of corn like nothing before them. Farmers swore by them. Salesmen couldn't keep them in stock. And then, almost overnight, they were gone, dragged into fence rows, buried in weeds, sold for scrap. Not because they were bad, not because they broke, but because of one single invention that made every last one of them worthless. These are 10 corn pickers that were brilliant and doomed. Number 10. The picker sheller. Let's start with an idea, not just a model, because the picker sheller was one of the cleverest half-steps in all of farm history, and it deserves a place on this list. Here's the problem it tried to solve. A traditional corn picker snapped the whole ear off the stalk and husked it, and you hauled ears to the crib. That was great if you fed livestock, but ear corn takes up enormous space and has to dry before it can be shelled and sold. So in the 1960s, several companies offered a sheller attachment that bolted right onto the back of the picker. International Harvester built one for its 234. New Idea offered sheller units. The Minneapolis-Moline and New Idea Uni machines could run a sheller too. Suddenly a picker could shell corn in the field and send clean kernels straight to the wagon. On paper, it was the best of both worlds. In practice, it was the worst kind of compromise. Farmers who ran them will tell you the picker sheller was slow. To do a clean job without cracking kernels or losing grain, you had to crawl through the field. As one Minnesota farmer put it, the machine just couldn't handle the corn and do a good job unless you went very slowly, so most of them eventually got traded for a combine, which was simply more efficient. The picker sheller was great engineering solving a real problem. But it was a bridge. And bridges get abandoned the moment somebody builds a highway. The shelling combine was that highway. This machine never stood a chance. Number 9. International Harvester 2M and 2MH series. Before International built its legendary 234, it made a whole family of pull-type and mounted picker huskers, machines like the 2M and 2MH that fed the Corn Belt for years. These were the workhorses of the 1950s and rolled right into the 1960s. The 2-row pull-type versions were built to be towed behind a farm-all, snapping 2 rows at a time and running the ears up an elevator into a trailing wagon. Each knew corn. The company's roots went all the way back to McCormick and Deering, the men who mechanized the American harvest in the first place, and their pickers reflected that pedigree. They were tough, well-built, and got the job done season after season. But the pull-type layout carried a flaw that every farmer knew and hated. When you opened a field, you had to knock down the outer rows to make room for the tractor, the picker, and the wagon. That corn either got run over or had to be picked up by hand, often by kids sent out to sort through the mess. On top of that, a pull-type rig plus a loaded wagon was a long, clumsy train to turn around, and if the ground got the least bit soft, you simply didn't have enough tractor to drag a full wagon through the mud. International's answer was to move the picker onto the tractor itself, which led to the machine we'll talk about in a minute. But these earlier IH picker huskers were the foundation. They were great in their day. Their day just ended. Number 8. Oliver Model 4 and the Oliver White pickers. Now for a name a lot of younger farmers have never heard. Oliver. Oliver built corn pickers at its plant in Battle Creek, Michigan, and the company took the job seriously. Its 2-row pull-type picker traced back to 1935, and a 1-row pull-type followed in 1947. Then, in June of 1950, after 7 years of engineering and development, Oliver put its Model 4 corn picker into production, the first direct tractor-mounted picker the company ever built, designed specifically to handle the modern high-yielding hybrid corn that was pushing yields as high as 100 bushels to the acre. For its time, that was serious performance. Oliver had a reputation for powerful engines and handsome styling, and its pickers carried that same pride of engineering. Farmers who ran them liked them. The machines were capable, and they husked clean. So what happened? 2 things. First, the same combine revolution that hit everyone else, and second, Oliver as a company got swallowed. In 1960, Oliver was absorbed into the White Motor Corporation, and over the following years, the storied Oliver name was gradually folded into White Farm Equipment. When a brand loses its identity, its niche products, like a corn picker in a shrinking market, are usually the first things quietly dropped. The Oliver picker didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because the market vanished and the company that made it disappeared right alongside it. Number 7. Minneapolis-Moline Uni-Farm. The Uni-System. This one might be the most ambitious machine on the entire list, and the most ahead of its time. In the early 1950s, Minneapolis-Moline engineers had a genuinely radical idea. Instead of buying a separate machine for every job, what if you bought one self-propelled power unit and simply swapped attachments onto it? They called it the Uni-Farm, or the Uni-System. The same self-propelled base could become a corn picker, a sheller, a combine, or a forage harvester. Change a few attachments with a handful of wrenches and you had a completely different machine. Think about how modern that is. This was the 1950s, and Minneapolis-Moline was already selling farmers a modular one-machine-does-everything platform. Custom operators loved it. One Indiana family used their Uni to shell high-moisture corn for neighbors' hogs because nobody else in the area had a machine that could shell in the field at all. But the Uni had a hard row to hoe. Swapping heads took time and muscle. Early units had no cab, so they were dusty and dirty to run. And the picker-sheller setup had the same speed problems we already talked about. Minneapolis-Moline, never the biggest player in the industry, couldn't push the concept into the mainstream. So in 1965, sold the entire Uni-System design to the New Idea company, which sets up our very next machine. The Uni-Farm was a brilliant idea, trapped in the wrong decade. 50 years later, the whole industry would embrace modular, multi-purpose machines. Minneapolis-Moline just got there far too early. Number 6. John Deere 300. Pull-type picker husker. Everybody knows John Deere. What fewer people remember is that Deere built some genuinely excellent corn pickers, and the pull-type 300 husker was one of the best of them. Here's why farmers respected it. The single biggest complaint about corn pickers was shelling loss. Kernels getting knocked off the ear by the snapping rolls and dropping onto the ground, lost forever. Some pickers were terrible for it. Farmers who ran certain competing machines watched several bushels an acre hit the dirt on every pass. The John Deere 300, by comparison, earned a reputation for keeping far more of that corn where it belonged, in the wagon, not on the ground. Guys who were fed up with losing grain would specifically go looking for a 300 to solve the problem. It was a flexible machine too. You could run it with a 2-row or 3-row corn head. And it handled 30-inch rows, something the older mounted pickers couldn't do. In good corn with a 3-row head, a 300 could really move. But it was still a pull type. That meant the same old headaches. Knocking down opening rows, dragging a wagon, and hunting for parts once Deere moved on. And moving on is exactly what Deere did, because the company's future was in combines with corn heads, not in dedicated ear corn pickers. The 300 was a great picker released into a dying category. Being the best of a breed doesn't help much when the whole breed is going extinct. Number 5. New Idea 300 series pickers, 323, 324, 325. If any company deserved to survive the picker era, it was New Idea, because corn pickers were practically their religion. New Idea had been in the business longer and deeper than almost anyone. Way back in 1928, the company introduced the first commercially successful corn sheller and husker. By the 1960s and 70s, New Idea was building beautifully made 2-row pickers, pull-type and mounted models like the 311 and the well-known 323, 324, and 325, with big, generous husking beds that did a clean job on the ear. Ask an old farmer which brand of picker was the best, and a huge number of them will answer without hesitation, New Idea. And here's the real proof of how good they were. New Idea kept building corn pickers longer than most of its rivals, and even today, at farm auctions across the Midwest, a solid New Idea 324 or 325 will still draw bidders. People are still running these machines decades after the combine supposedly killed the picker. But even the specialist couldn't beat the math. The New Idea pickers had one honest weakness. With today's drier hybrid corn, the plain snapping rolls could shell a fair amount onto the ground, and no amount of adjustment fully fixed it. More importantly, the customers were disappearing. As dairy herds shrank and farmers stopped feeding ear corn, the reason to own a picker at all simply evaporated. New idea made the best picker for a job that fewer and fewer people needed done. That's a heartbreaking way to fail, by being excellent at something the world stopped wanting. Number 4. Allis-Chalmers. 150, 170, and 190. Allis-Chalmers doesn't always get its due. But when it came to corn pickers, the company solved a problem before most of its competitors even admitted it existed. That problem again was shelling loss, corn getting butt-shelled off the ear by the snapping rolls. For decades, pickers just had long snapping rolls and nothing over them, and when corn was wet and the kernels clung tightly to the cob, that was fine. But as hybrids improved and dried down faster in the field, the losses got, in the words of one corn head expert, absolutely horrendous. Allis-Chalmers got out ahead of this. Their mounted 2-row pickers, the 150, the 170, and the 190, used deck plates, also called stripper plates, over the rolls to strip the ear off cleanly while shaking far less loose grain onto the ground. In fact, Allis pickers are remembered by many as being among the very first to use stripper plates at all. That's a real engineering achievement, and it made these machines genuinely good in the field. So why are they on a failed list? Because a mounted picker lives or dies with the tractor it bolts onto. Allis-Chalmers pickers were built to mount on tractors like the D17 and D19. And once Allis stopped making picker-compatible tractors, and once the combine took over the corn belt, the mounted picker had nowhere left to live. A great head with nowhere to bolt is just scrap metal. The 150, 170, and 190 were good enough to deserve better. They didn't get it. Number 3. John Deere. 237. Every green paint farmer of a certain age remembers the John Deere mounted picker, and the 237 was the last of the line. The 237 was a 2-row picker that mounted directly onto the tractor, and thousands of Deere farmers ran them through the 1960s. It was a familiar, dependable machine, the kind of implement a farm family would hang on to for years, hauling ears to the crib to feed cattle. There's a whole generation that grew up watching Dad bolt a 237 onto a 4010 or a 4020 every fall, then pick corn from October right up toward December. But the 237 carried 2 problems that together sealed its fate. The first was technical. The John Deere heads of that era could shell a fair amount of corn onto the ground, enough that some farmers eventually parked their 237 and switched to a machine that dropped less grain. The second problem was bigger and unstoppable. John Deere itself was walking away from the mounted picker. The company's last picker-compatible tractors were the 3020 and the 4020, and when that generation ended around 1972, so did the ability to even mount a new Deere picker. The following 30 series tractors didn't have the removable fenders a mounted picker needed, so the 237 wasn't just discontinued. The entire concept it depended on was retired. It was a good, honest machine that got left behind by its own maker. When even John Deere decides the picker era is over, the picker era is over. Number 2. International Harvester. 234. Ask a room full of old Corn Belt farmers to name the single best corn picker ever built, and one machine gets shouted out more than any other: the International 234. International introduced the 234 corn harvester in the mid-1960s, a 2-row picker that mounted onto big tractors like the 706 and 806. And what set it apart was that IH clearly learned every lesson the industry had to teach. The 234 used deck plates or stripper plates over the snapping rolls, the same technology that cut shelling loss, so it kept corn on the ear and out of the dirt far better than the pickers that came before it. It fed into a big 12-roll husking bed that did a clean job on the ears, and you could add a sheller attachment to turn it into a picker sheller when you wanted shelled corn. Put it all together and you had a fast, clean, well-engineered machine. Farmers who ran a 234 on a 706 talk about it picking corn fast, and the stripper plates made a real measurable difference in how much grain they saved. Decades later, collectors still call it one of the best pickers ever made, and a good one with a husking bed and sheller still commands real money. So how does the best picker ever built end up on a failed list? Because it was the finest example of a machine the market no longer wanted. The 234 was the last mounted picker International ever made. It arrived just as the combine with a corn head was sweeping the industry. The perfect machine, delivered right at the moment the whole category was collapsing. The 234 didn't lose because it was beaten. It lost because it was already obsolete the day it was born. Number 1. The new idea. Minneapolis-Moline Uni-System, Uni-Harvester. And at number 1, we come back to the boldest machine of them all. The one new idea bought from Minneapolis-Moline and carried further than anyone thought possible. When New Idea took over the Uni-System design in 1965, they didn't just keep it alive, they expanded it into one of the most versatile machines ever sold to farmers. The self-propelled Uni-Harvester could be a corn picker, a picker sheller, a combine, a forage harvester, and over the years, attachments appeared for husking beds, choppers, and even a snowblower and sprayer setups. New Idea developed stripper plate corn heads for it to cut shelling loss. 2 people who knew what they were doing could swap implements in about 1 hour. For a livestock farmer who needed to pick ear corn, shell corn, chop silage, and combine small grain, one Uni could theoretically do it all. And here's the incredible part. While every other picker on this list was dead by the late 1970s, the Uni-System just kept going. Under New Idea, and later under the White New Idea and ACCO banners, production of these machines continued into the 1990s. Farmers in dairy country ran them hard and loved them. The versatility was real, but versatility was also its downfall. A machine that does 5 jobs adequately can't beat 5 specialized machines that each do one job brilliantly, and by the 80s and 90s, the specialized combine did the big job, shelling corn better and faster than any Uni. Swapping heads was still work, and as the machines aged, parts became a serious problem, which is the quiet killer of any orphaned design. Today, a handful of Unis survive, many of them kept alive by seed corn companies that still need to harvest corn on the ear. It's the perfect ending for the perfect great but failed machine. The most ambitious corn picker ever built, outlasting all its rivals, and still finally beaten by the simple shelling combine. The Uni-System was decades ahead of its time, and being ahead of your time in farming usually means going broke gloriously. If you enjoyed this trip through the iron of the Corn Belt, let me know down in the comments which of these your family ran. The New Idea, the 234, the old John Deere. Give this video a like, subscribe for more farm machinery history, and I'll see you in the next one.